Picture standing on the shore of a tiny island, gazing out at an endless expanse of ocean stretching farther than the eye can see. No compass, no maps, no GPS, just the wind in your hair and the rhythm of the waves beneath your canoe. Now imagine setting off into that vast blue unknown, trusting nothing but the stars above and the whispers of the sea to guide you. This wasn't just a daring adventure, it was everyday life for the Polynesian navigators, the greatest explorers the world has ever known. These master voyagers didn't just cross oceans, they conquered them, charting a network of islands scattered across millions of square miles with nothing but their deep understanding of nature's hidden language. What makes their story even more extraordinary is the sheer scale of their achievements. While European sailors clung to coastlines, terrified of venturing too far from land, Polynesian navigators were crisscrossing the Pacific with confidence, discovering new islands and settling them centuries before Columbus even set sail. They didn't just stumble upon these distant shores, they found them with intention, using techniques so advanced they're still studied by modern sailors today. Think about that. In an era before written language or metal tools, they developed a system of navigation so precise it could pinpoint tiny dots of land in the world's largest ocean. But how did they do it? That's the mystery we're about to unravel. This isn't just a tale of ancient history, it's a testament to human ingenuity, a story of how observation, memory, and respect for the natural world unlocked secrets we're only beginning to fully appreciate. From reading the subtle patterns of ocean swells to memorizing the paths of hundreds of stars, their knowledge was a living map passed down through generations. And the most incredible part, their legacy isn't lost to time. Today, Polynesian navigation is experiencing a revival, inspiring a new wave of explorers to reconnect with these timeless skills. So settle in, because by the end of this journey, you'll see the ocean, the stars, and the art of exploration in a whole new light. The story of Polynesian navigation begins not with a single voyage, but with generations of careful observation and cultural wisdom passed down like precious cargo. These ancestors didn't wake up one day knowing how to cross thousands of miles of open ocean. They learned through trial, error, and an unbreakable bond with their environment. Starting from the islands of Southeast Asia, they began venturing eastward around 3,000 years ago, their double-hulled canoes carrying not just families and supplies, but an entire way of life. Each successful journey added to their collective knowledge, creating a living library of navigation techniques that grew richer with every new discovery. What's fascinating is how they turned the Pacific into a highway long before roads or railways existed elsewhere in the world. Unlike explorers who set sail hoping to stumble upon new lands, Polynesians navigated with purpose. They understood ocean currents like modern commuters understand subway lines, recognizing how certain flows could carry them toward islands beyond the horizon. Their canoes weren't just boats, they were mobile classrooms where elders taught younger generations to read the subtle language of the sea. The ripple of waves against the hull, the flight patterns of birds at dusk, even the way clouds gathered on the horizon, all of it carried meaning. Oral tradition was the heartbeat of this knowledge. Without written records, Polynesians preserved their wisdom through chants that mapped the stars and stories that encoded sailing directions. A single song might contain the precise sequence of star positions needed to reach a distant island, while chants about mythical heroes often doubled as sailing instructions. This wasn't just navigation, it was poetry in motion, blending science and art in ways that still leave researchers in awe. And because this knowledge was so vital to survival, it was guarded fiercely, shared only with those who proved themselves worthy through years of apprenticeship. The true brilliance of their system lay in its adaptability. Unlike rigid maps that become outdated, Polynesian navigation evolved with each new generation. When they encountered unexpected storms or discovered uncharted islands, they didn't see obstacles. They saw opportunities to expand their understanding. This flexibility allowed them to settle islands as far apart as Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island, creating a network of communities separated by vast distances yet connected by shared knowledge. By the time European ships arrived in the Pacific, Polynesians had already mastered the ocean in ways that left outsiders mystified, proof that sometimes the most advanced technology isn't a gadget, but a mind trained to listen to the world. To understand how the Polynesians mastered the vast Pacific, you have to start with their most essential tool, the Waukolua, their legendary double-hulled canoe. These weren't just boats, they were floating sanctuaries capable of carrying families, livestock, and supplies across thousands of miles of open ocean. Picture two sleek hulls carved from massive logs, lashed together with cords made from coconut husk fibers, creating a platform so stable it could weather the fiercest storms. The design was sheer genius. Twin hulls provided balance, preventing capsizing even in rough seas, while the open deck between them offered space for storage and shelter. The construction process itself was a marvel of resourcefulness. Using stone adzes and fire, craftsmen painstakingly hollowed out giant logs, often from breadfruit or koa trees, shaping them into smooth, hydrodynamic forms. Every curve mattered, minimizing drag while maximizing speed. But the real innovation was in the lashing technique. Miles of coconut fiber rope, soaked in seawater to strengthen it, wove the entire structure together without a single nail or metal fastener. This flexibility allowed the canoe to move with the waves rather than fight them, absorbing the ocean's energy like a living thing. And because the materials were all biodegradable, these vessels left no trace behind, just another example of how Polynesians worked in harmony with their environment. What truly set the Waukolua apart, though, was its adaptability. A large sail woven from pandanus leaves could catch the wind for speed, while paddlers provided backup when the breeze died down. The hulls were designed with storage compartments for fresh water, preserved food, and even seedlings for planting on new islands. Some canoes had removable sections, allowing repairs at sea without sinking. This wasn't just transportation, it was a self-sufficient, mobile ecosystem, engineered to sustain life for weeks or even months on the open ocean. Perhaps most impressive was how these vessels reflected their creators' deep understanding of the sea. The Waukolua wasn't just built to survive the Pacific, it was built to communicate with it. Navigators could feel subtle changes in the canoe's movement, detecting distant swells or currents that hinted at land beyond the horizon. The sound of waves slapping against the hulls, the way the wind tugged at the sail, every detail became part of the navigational toolkit. In many ways, the canoe wasn't just a tool but an extension of the navigator's own senses, honed over generations to conquer an ocean that others feared to cross. Wayfinding wasn't just a skill, it was an entire philosophy of navigation, a way of thinking that transformed the ocean from a terrifying void into a familiar, readable landscape. Unlike European explorers who depended on instruments that could break or lose accuracy, Polynesian navigators trusted something far more reliable: the natural world itself. Every detail, from the angle of the stars to the taste of the breeze, became a clue in an elaborate puzzle only they could solve. Take the stars, for example. While most of us might recognize a constellation or two, Polynesian navigators memorized the rising and setting points of over 200 stars, each one serving as a celestial signpost. They didn't just see a sky full of lights, they saw a grand highway with specific stars marking the path to different islands. If Arcturus rose directly overhead, they knew they were aligned with Hawaii. If the Southern Cross dipped low on the horizon, they were on course for Aotearoa, what we now call New Zealand. These weren't vague directions, they were precise, repeatable coordinates, etched into memory through years of training. But stars were only part of the story. During the day, when clouds might obscure the sky, navigators turned to the ocean itself. The Pacific isn't just a flat, featureless expanse. It pulses with swells, currents, and rhythms that most of us would never notice. Polynesian wayfinders learned to read these subtle movements like a language. A slight bend in the waves might reveal an island still below the horizon, its presence disrupting the ocean's natural flow. Even the color of the water held meaning. Deeper blues signaled open ocean, while lighter shades hinted at shallows or distant reefs. Birds became another vital compass. Certain species, like the Manu Oku or white tern, never strayed more than 100 miles from land. Spotting one meant an island was close, and their flight patterns at dusk could point directly toward it. Navigators even paid attention to the types of seaweed floating by or the smell of the wind, which could carry the scent of flowers or earth from unseen shores. It was as if the entire environment whispered directions to those who knew how to listen. The real magic, though, was how these navigators synthesized all this information in real time, keeping a mental map of their position without ever seeing it. They didn't just follow one clue, they cross-referenced stars with swells, birds with currents, constantly adjusting their course like a living, breathing GPS. And they did it all without writing anything down, relying instead on chance, stories, and hands-on experience passed through generations. That's why wayfinding wasn't just about reaching a destination. It was about understanding the ocean as a living, interconnected system, one that rewarded patience, observation, and respect. Even today, modern scientists marvel at the precision of these techniques. In the 1970s, when Hawaiian navigator Mau Piailug revived the art of wayfinding and sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti without instruments, he proved what Polynesians had known for centuries, that the natural world holds all the guidance we need if only we learn to see it. For Polynesian navigators, the night sky wasn't just a spectacle, it was a dynamic map, alive with meaning. Imagine sailing under a canopy of stars so clear and bright they cast reflections on the water, each one a familiar guidepost in the endless dark. These master wayfinders didn't just glance at the heavens, they memorized the precise points where stars rose and set along the horizon, creating an invisible grid that spanned the entire Pacific. A star like Hokule'a, what we call Arcturus, wasn't merely a twinkling light, it was a beacon. When it stood directly overhead, navigators knew they were on the latitude of Hawaii, a celestial checkpoint burned into memory through generations of repetition. The brilliance of their system lay in its simplicity and reliability. Unlike a magnetic compass which could fail or be thrown off by storms, the stars followed predictable paths night after night, season after season. Polynesians divided the sky into conceptual houses, each representing a segment of the horizon where specific stars appeared and disappeared. As one star set, another would rise to take its place, creating a rotating sequence navigators could follow like stepping stones across the ocean. This wasn't just observation, it was a sophisticated mental algorithm, constantly updated as the canoe moved. Training to read this celestial map required years of disciplined apprenticeship. Young navigators learned through storytelling and song, with chants encoding the positions of stars and their relationships to islands. One chant might describe how the Pleiades cluster, known as Makale, signaled the start of the voyaging season when its rising aligned with calm seas. Another would detail how the Southern Cross, called Hanayakamalama, pointed toward Tahiti when it tilted at a certain angle. These weren't just poems, they were mnemonic devices compressing vast amounts of navigational data into rhythmic, unforgettable verses. But celestial navigation wasn't just about memorization, it demanded adaptability. Cloud cover could obscure stars for nights on end, forcing navigators to rely on secondary clues like wave patterns or the behavior of birds. Even when the sky was clear, the rising points of stars shifted slightly throughout the year due to Earth's orbit, requiring constant mental adjustments. The true test of a master navigator wasn't just knowing the stars, it was sensing how to reinterpret their messages amid changing conditions, blending celestial knowledge with every other tool in their arsenal. What's astonishing is how accurately this knowledge was preserved without written records. In the 1970s, when Hawaiian scholar Nainoa Thompson set out to revive traditional wayfinding, he relied on oral teachings passed down from Mau Piailug, one of the last living masters of celestial navigation. Together, they proved that these ancient techniques weren't myths, they were precise, repeatable science. When Thompson successfully sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti using only the stars, he didn't just retrace an ancient route, he reaffirmed a legacy of brilliance written across the night sky. The Polynesian star compass, still taught today, stands as one of humanity's most elegant intellectual achievements. It transformed the vast, trackless ocean into a marked trail, with celestial bodies serving as both guide and companion. Every time we look up at the stars today, we're seeing the same sky that once led explorers to new worlds, a reminder that the greatest journeys begin not with technology, but with the courage to trust the wisdom written in the heavens. While the stars provided a celestial map, Polynesian navigators knew the ocean itself held secrets just as revealing. The Pacific isn't a flat, silent desert. It's a living, breathing entity, pulsing with swells that roll across thousands of miles like invisible fingerprints. These master wayfinders didn't just sail on the water, they learned to listen to it, feeling the subtlest shifts in rhythm that hinted at land long before it appeared on the horizon. Imagine sitting in a canoe, eyes closed, hands trailing in the water. To the untrained senses, the waves might feel random, but to a navigator, each swell told a story. Primary swells, born from distant winds or storms, moved in steady, predictable patterns. But when those swells brushed against unseen islands, they bounced back as reflected waves, creating interference patterns a skilled navigator could decode. It was like hearing an echo in a canyon. The way the waves crisscrossed revealed the presence and even the direction of land, sometimes hundreds of miles away. The real artistry came in distinguishing these patterns amid the chaos of open ocean. Navigators would lie down in the canoe, pressing their bodies against the hull to feel the vibrations. A slight shudder or change in pitch could signal a shift in swell direction, a clue that an island's influence was distorting the ocean's usual rhythm. They even paid attention to how the canoe's movement changed, whether it rocked side to side or pitched forward, clues that spoke volumes about the unseen topography below. But the ocean offered more than just waves. Currents acted like underwater rivers, and Polynesians memorized their precise routes. A sudden warming of the water or a change in its color, from deep blue to turquoise, might signal the edge of a current leading to a known island chain. Even the behavior of marine life became a compass. Phosphorescent plankton, glowing brighter in certain areas, often clustered near land where nutrients were abundant. A sudden gathering of birds at sunset, flying in a determined direction, wasn't just a pretty sight, it was a beacon pointing toward rest and resources. This deep connection to the sea wasn't just technical, it was spiritual. Navigators spoke of the ocean as an ancestor, a teacher whose language required patience and respect to understand. Modern scientists call this wave piloting, but to Polynesians, it was a dialogue, an ongoing conversation with the natural world where every ripple, every shift in current, was a syllable in a sentence guiding them home. The proof of its effectiveness, European sailors, armed with compasses and sextants, often marveled at how Polynesian canoes arrived at tiny islands with pinpoint accuracy, even in overcast weather when the stars were hidden. It wasn't magic, it was a lifetime of training, a sensory acuity honed to near superhuman levels. Today, oceanographers study these ancient techniques to improve modern navigation, proving once again that the old ways hold wisdom even our technology hasn't fully replicated. What's perhaps most humbling is realizing this knowledge wasn't written in books or etched in stone. It lived in the bodies and memories of navigators who could feel their way across the planet's largest ocean. In an age where we rely on satellites to tell us where we are, their legacy reminds us that the world still whispers its secrets to those willing to listen. For Polynesian navigators, birds weren't just creatures of the sky. They were living compasses, each species carrying vital clues about the unseen world beyond the horizon. Take the frigate bird, known for its sleek silhouette and effortless glide. These birds never ventured more than 50 miles from land, making their appearance a surefire sign that solid ground lay within reach. Spotting one circling above wasn't just a welcome sight. It was a navigational lifeline, a natural beacon pointing the way to safety. But the true genius lay in how navigators interpreted even the subtlest behaviors. At dusk, certain land-based birds like terns or noddies would fly steadily in one direction toward their roosting spots on shore. By observing their flight path, a skilled wayfinder could plot a course to islands still invisible below the curve of the earth. Even the absence of birds spoke volumes. Open ocean species like albatrosses signaled deep water, while a sudden shift in the types of birds overhead hinted at changing currents or nearby atolls. Clouds, too, became part of this intricate language. Distant islands created unique microclimates, causing clouds to form or linger in telltale ways. A stationary puffy cloud on an otherwise clear horizon often sat atop an island, its moisture condensing as it brushed against high land. Polynesians called these cloud homes, and they served as floating signposts. Darker clouds might indicate rain over lush volcanic peaks, while the faint greenish tint reflected from lagoons could tint the underside of clouds, a phenomenon modern sailors still call lagoon glare. Then there was the water itself. Navigators recognized that the ocean's color shifted with depth and terrain. Shallow reefs or sandy banks transformed deep blue into vibrant turquoise, while certain currents carried distinct hues due to sediment or plankton. Even the taste of the wind carried clues. A faint scent of earth or flowers meant land was near, carried on breezes that had brushed against vegetation. This system wasn't just about individual clues, it was about weaving them together into a coherent story. A frigate bird overhead, a peculiar cloud formation, and a sudden change in watercolor didn't just suggest land, they confirmed it. The Polynesians' ability to cross-reference these signs with celestial and wave knowledge created a redundancy that made their navigation nearly foolproof. What's remarkable is how this wisdom persists today. Modern voyagers like the crew of Hokule'a still practice these techniques, proving that the old ways hold up even in the 21st century. When GPS fails or batteries die, the birds, the clouds, and the sea itself still speak if we've learned how to listen. Imagine holding an entire library of navigation knowledge, every star path, every current, every hidden island, not in books but in your memory. That's exactly what Polynesian navigators achieved through their oral traditions, turning chants and stories into living encyclopedias of the Pacific. These weren't just tales told around the fire. They were meticulously crafted repositories of survival, where every rhythm, every phrase, held coded instructions for crossing thousands of miles of open ocean. A single chant about a mythical hero might secretly describe the sequence of stars to follow toward Tahiti, while a song about a battle between gods could encode the storm patterns to avoid near Fiji. The precision of these oral maps was staggering. Navigators memorized hundreds of verses, each one a building block in a mental atlas. One chant might list the rising and setting points of stars in the order they'd appear during a voyage, creating a celestial checklist. Another might describe ocean currents using poetic metaphors, comparing a swift flow to a charging bore or a gentle drift to a swaying palm. These weren't just artistic choices, they were memory aids designed to make complex data unforgettable. Rhyme and rhythm transformed dry facts into something visceral, ensuring critical details stuck in the mind through years of repetition. But preserving this knowledge wasn't a casual endeavor. Apprentices spent decades learning from master navigators, not just reciting chants but internalizing their deeper meanings. A phrase like, "the eel that swims in the sky," might refer to the Milky Way's path toward Samoa, while "the shark's teeth" could describe the jagged wave patterns near certain reefs. Misinterpret a single metaphor and an entire voyage could veer off course. That's why these traditions were guarded so closely, passed down only to those who proved their dedication through rigorous testing. What's truly remarkable is how these oral techniques adapted over time. When navigators discovered new islands or encountered shifting currents, they didn't carve the updates in stone. They wove them into existing chants, expanding the collective memory like a living document. A story about a legendary voyage might gain new verses with each generation, subtly incorporating fresh discoveries without disrupting the original structure. This fluidity made Polynesian navigation endlessly adaptable, a system that could evolve without losing its core wisdom. Even the act of chanting served a practical purpose. Reciting navigational verses during a voyage wasn't just about recalling information. It created a rhythmic cadence that helped measure time and distance. The length of a chant might correspond to the duration of a star's visibility, or the pauses between lines could mark shifts in wind patterns. In fog or storms, when visual cues vanished, these auditory anchors kept crews oriented, turning sound into a lifeline. Today, researchers compare these oral traditions to modern data compression, a way to pack vast amounts of information into compact, error-resistant formats. Unlike written records which could burn or fade, these chants survived as long as there were voices to carry them. When European colonizers suppressed Polynesian wayfinding in the 19th century, it was these oral archives that kept the knowledge alive in secret, waiting for the day when voyagers like Mau Piailug would revive them. The fact that we can still hear these chants today, guiding canoes across the Pacific as they did centuries ago, is a testament to the power of human memory and the enduring brilliance of those who turned navigation into an art of the spoken word. By the mid-20th century, the once unbroken chain of Polynesian navigation knowledge hung by a thread. Colonization, modernization, and the dominance of Western technology had nearly erased centuries of celestial wayfinding until one man from a tiny Micronesian island became the bridge between past and future. Mau Piailug, born on the coral atoll of Satawal, carried within him what few others did: the complete, uncorrupted knowledge of PWO, the sacred initiation of master navigators. His people had guarded these secrets for generations, but as the world changed, Mau faced an agonizing choice: keep the wisdom locked away, or share it with those desperate to reconnect with their heritage. The turning point came in 1976 when Hawaiian cultural revivalists built Hokule'a, a replica of an ancient Polynesian double-hulled canoe. Their mission was audacious, to sail from Hawaii to Tahiti using only traditional navigation, proving their ancestors hadn't merely drifted aimlessly, but had intentionally explored the Pacific. There was just one problem. After generations of lost knowledge, no living Hawaiian remembered how. Enter Mau. Though he wasn't Polynesian himself, his Micronesian traditions shared the same celestial roots. With quiet resolve, he agreed to guide Hokule'a across 2,500 miles of open ocean, relying solely on stars, swells, and the whispers of nature. What followed wasn't just a voyage, it was a revolution. For 33 days, Mau stood on Hokule'a's deck, reading the night sky like a highway, feeling the ocean's pulse through the canoe's hull. Without compass, sextant, or chart, he navigated storms, doldrums, and the skepticism of a world that had forgotten these skills were possible. When Hokule'a finally reached Tahiti, greeted by 17,000 cheering people, it wasn't just a triumph of seamanship, it was cultural resurrection. Mau had done more than reach an island. He'd proven that ancestral knowledge wasn't myth, but precise, reproducible science. But his greatest legacy wasn't that single voyage, it was what he chose to do next. Instead of returning to solitude, Mau began teaching, breaking centuries of tradition that reserved navigation secrets for select initiates. He mentored a new generation, including Hawaiian Nainoa Thompson, who would become the first native Hawaiian in centuries to master wayfinding. Mau's lessons weren't just technical, they were philosophical. He taught that navigation wasn't about conquering the ocean, but conversing with it, a mindset that transformed students' relationship with the natural world. Today, the ripple effect of Mau's courage is everywhere. The Polynesian Voyaging Society's fleet has circled the globe, spreading his teachings. Schools across the Pacific now incorporate wayfinding into curricula, blending astronomy, ecology, and cultural pride. Modern scientists collaborate with navigators, studying how traditional knowledge can complement satellite data. And perhaps most poignantly, young Pacific Islanders who once saw their heritage as irrelevant now wear the title of Wayfinder with pride, not just on the ocean, but as a metaphor for navigating life. Mau Piailug passed away in 2010, but his gift was the opposite of loss. By sharing what others might have hoarded, he turned a dying art into a living movement. The stars he followed still shine, the ocean he loved still whispers, and somewhere, always, a new generation is learning to listen. The Hokule'a's journey in 1976 was more than a voyage, it was a reawakening. For centuries, the dominant narrative claimed Polynesians had stumbled upon islands by accident, drifting helplessly on ocean currents. The Hokule'a, a painstakingly crafted replica of an ancient voyaging canoe, was built to shatter that myth. But from the moment its hull first touched the water, the challenges were immense. Traditional materials like koa wood and coconut fiber lashings had to be sourced through painstaking effort, and few living Hawaiians remembered how to handle such a vessel. The crew, mostly volunteers with more passion than experience, trained for months under Mau Piailug's stern guidance, learning not just to sail, but to think like navigators. They memorized star paths by night, practiced reading swells by day, and endured grueling drills to build the endurance needed for weeks at sea. When the canoe finally set sail from Hawaii toward Tahiti, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Skeptics warned they'd vanish without a trace, while Polynesian communities across the Pacific held their breath. The crew faced relentless sun, storms that threatened to tear the sails, and stretches of eerie calm when the ocean became a mirror. Without instruments, every decision rested on Mau's ability to interpret nature's signs, a skill that baffled even the crew. At one point, when clouds blotted out the stars for nights on end, he guided them by the feel of waves against the hull alone. Then came the moment that sealed the voyage's legacy. After 33 days with no land in sight, a crew member spotted birds flying purposefully east at dusk. Mau adjusted their course accordingly, and the next morning, Tahiti's peaks emerged from the horizon like a mirage made real. The impact of that arrival was seismic. Thousands of Tahitians swam out to greet the Hokule'a, weeping as they touched its weathered hull. For many, it was proof that their ancestors' achievements weren't legends. They were truths written in the language of waves and wind. The voyage ignited a cultural wildfire across Polynesia. Suddenly, children who'd been taught to dismiss their heritage as primitive were clamoring to learn star compasses. Communities revived canoe-building traditions that had lain dormant for generations. Scholars began re-examining oral histories with new respect, realizing they weren't just stories, but carefully preserved navigational logs. Today, the Hokule'a isn't just a museum piece, it's a floating classroom. Its later voyages, crewed entirely by navigators trained in the old ways, have circled the globe, from the glaciers of Alaska to the canals of New York. Each landing sparks the same question: how could a canoe without GPS cross oceans modern ships approach with caution? The answer lies in the deeper lesson of the Hokule'a, that reconnecting with ancestral knowledge isn't about rejecting modernity, but about remembering we carry ancient brilliance within us. When the canoe's sails catch the wind today, they pull more than a hull. They carry the weight of a people reclaiming their place as the Pacific's master storytellers, one wave at a time. The sweet potato might seem like an unlikely detective in one of history's greatest maritime mysteries, but this humble root vegetable holds the key to a startling possibility: that Polynesian navigators didn't just conquer the Pacific, they may have reached the Americas centuries before Columbus. Here's the puzzle: sweet potatoes are native to South America, yet they were thriving across Polynesia when European explorers arrived. How did a crop that couldn't survive floating across the ocean on its own end up scattered across islands thousands of miles from its origin? The answer could rewrite our understanding of ancient exploration. Genetic studies add another layer of intrigue. The Polynesian word for sweet potato kumala bears a striking resemblance to the Quechua term kumara, spoken by indigenous peoples of the Andes. Coincidence? Maybe not. DNA analysis of sweet potato varieties shows they diverged from their South American ancestors around 1,000 years ago, right when Polynesian voyaging was at its peak. Even more compelling, chicken bones found in Chile dating to the 14th century match Polynesian varieties, not European breeds. These scattered clues paint a picture of contact, of canoes landing on unfamiliar shores and returning with more than just stories. But the evidence isn't just botanical or genetic. Traditional Polynesian oral histories speak of legendary voyages to a distant land called Kahiki, sometimes described as a place of towering mountains and strange peoples, details that align oddly well with the Andes. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Pacific, pre-Columbian artwork in South America depicts figures with Polynesian-style tattoos and double-hulled canoes unlike any local designs. The famous Rapa Nui statues of Easter Island, carved by Polynesian settlers, share uncanny stylistic similarities with stone figures in Peru. Skeptics argue the currents make such voyages improbable, but Polynesians had already mastered journeys just as daring. If they could find tiny Easter Island, the most remote inhabited place on Earth, why not the vast coastline of South America? Modern replicas like the Hokule'a have proven that intentional two-way travel was possible, riding the Humboldt Current southward and catching westerly winds back home. The debate isn't just academic, it's about recognizing the scope of indigenous achievement. For too long, the narrative of discovery has been monopolized by European voices, while Polynesian accomplishments were dismissed as accidental. Every sweet potato plant, every shared word, every chicken bone whispers a different story, one of purposeful exploration that bridged the world's greatest ocean long before the so-called Age of Discovery began. Whether these crossings were routine or rare, the traces they left challenge us to see the ancient Pacific not as a barrier but as a highway, one navigated by the greatest sailors of their time. Today, the ancient art of Polynesian navigation isn't confined to history books. It's thriving in classrooms, docks, and open oceans where a new generation of wayfinders is being trained. At the heart of this revival are institutions like Hawaii's Polynesian Voyaging Society, where students don't just study star charts, they learn to feel the ocean's pulse just as their ancestors did. These schools are more than cultural preservation projects. They're living laboratories where centuries-old techniques meet modern questions about sustainability, identity, and our relationship with the natural world. Walk into one of these classrooms and you'll find teenagers memorizing the Hawaiian star compass not from screens, but by lying on their backs under the night sky, tracing imaginary lines between constellations with their fingers. They practice estimating speed by tossing orange peels over a canoe's side and counting how quickly they drift away, honing the same observational skills that once guided voyages across thousands of miles. But what's truly remarkable is how these programs blend tradition with innovation. While students learn to navigate without instruments, they also study oceanography and climate science, understanding how shifting currents and weather patterns might have affected their ancestors' routes and how they'll impact future voyages. The training goes far beyond technical skills. Apprentices spend years building relationships with mentors, not just as teachers but as cultural anchors. Before they ever steer a canoe, they learn the chants that encode navigational wisdom, the protocols for asking permission to enter sacred spaces, and the responsibility that comes with carrying ancestral knowledge. This holistic approach produces navigators who don't just know how to reach an island, but why the journey matters. When they finally embark on open ocean voyages as part of their training, it's not just a test of skill, it's a rite of passage, connecting them to an unbroken lineage of explorers. Beyond Hawaii, similar movements are flourishing across the Pacific. In New Zealand, the Wakatapu program teaches Maori youth to navigate traditional Waka Awaua canoes using star paths their ancestors followed to Aotearoa. Tahiti's Hokulea Foundation runs workshops where elders demonstrate how to read cloud formations specific to the Society Islands. Even in landlocked communities, simulators recreate ocean conditions using virtual reality, proving that you don't need an ocean nearby to keep these traditions alive. What makes these programs revolutionary is their refusal to treat wayfinding as a relic. Instead, they position it as a vital toolkit for the future. Students explore how traditional ecological knowledge could help monitor coral reef health or predict storm patterns in a changing climate. Some graduates apply their training to careers in marine conservation, using their understanding of migratory bird patterns to protect endangered species. Others bring wayfinding principles into unexpected fields, urban planners drawing on spatial awareness techniques to design more intuitive cities, or therapists using navigational metaphors to help clients find direction in life. The impact ripples far beyond individual students. Every time a voyaging canoe like Hokule'a or its sister vessel Hikianalia docks in a new community, it sparks conversations about cultural pride and environmental stewardship. School children who touch its weathered hulls aren't just seeing a museum piece, they're meeting a living tradition that could one day include them. This isn't nostalgia, it's the opposite. By giving young people the tools to navigate both literal and metaphorical oceans, these schools are proving that ancestral wisdom isn't about looking backward, it's about charting a course forward, with the stars as our oldest and most faithful guides. Modern scientists studying Polynesian wayfinding have uncovered something extraordinary. These ancient techniques weren't just effective, they were scientifically precise. When researchers tracked traditional navigators using GPS, they found their course corrections could pinpoint destinations within a margin of just 2 degrees accuracy, rivaling early European compasses and sextants. But how did humans achieve such precision without instruments? The answer lies in a sophisticated blend of physics, biology, and neuroscience that we're only beginning to fully understand. Take wave piloting, for example. What navigators described as feeling the ocean's movements has a concrete basis in hydrodynamics. Islands disrupt deep ocean swells, creating reflected waves that intersect with incoming ones. These interference patterns form predictable angles like ripples crossing in a pond that trained navigators can detect through subtle changes in a canoe's motion. Studies at the University of Hawaii found that Polynesian navigators could sense swell direction shifts as slight as 5 degrees, a skill modern sailors need electronic sensors to replicate. Their ability to read these wave signatures wasn't mystical intuition. It was an acute sensitivity to the physics of fluid dynamics, honed through years of tactile experience. The biological adaptations are just as fascinating. Neuroscientists now believe prolonged wayfinding training physically rewires the brain. London taxi drivers famously develop enlarged hippocampi, the region responsible for spatial memory from memorizing city streets. Polynesian navigators likely underwent similar changes, but on a far grander scale. Their mental maps didn't just cover blocks or towns, they encompassed millions of square miles of open ocean. When they memorized star paths, they weren't simply recalling points of light, they were constructing a cognitive GPS, with celestial bodies serving as 3-dimensional waypoints. Brain imaging studies suggest this type of navigation activates both visual and proprioceptive networks, meaning navigators literally felt their position in space through a combination of stellar observations and bodily awareness. Even their reliance on birds and clouds has solid scientific grounding. Seabirds like the white tern follow specific commuting patterns between feeding grounds and nesting sites, a behavior modern ecologists call direction fidelity. By tracking these consistent flight paths at dusk, navigators effectively outsourced their scouting to species evolutionarily hardwired for precision homing. Similarly, the stationary cloud homes over islands occur due to orographic lift. Moist air rising over landforms creates persistent cloud formations exactly where traditional knowledge said they'd be. Perhaps most remarkable is how these techniques compensate for human sensory limits. Star compasses account for atmospheric refraction, the bending of starlight near the horizon that would throw off crude measurements. Navigators also instinctively corrected for the Coriolis effect, the subtle deflection of moving objects caused by Earth's rotation that baffled European sailors until the 19th century. Unlike Western navigation, which tried to conquer natural forces with mechanical tools, Polynesian wayfinding worked with these forces, turning potential errors into guidance systems. Contemporary navigators like Nainoa Thompson describe wayfinding as a continuous dialogue with the environment, a feedback loop where every observation fine-tunes the next. Satellite tracking of traditional voyages shows this approach isn't just poetic, it's mathematically sound. When clouds obscure stars, navigators switch to wave patterns. When swells flatten, they watch birds. This redundancy creates a robust system where no single point of failure can derail the journey, a principle modern engineers now call graceful degradation in system design. The implications stretch far beyond historical curiosity. Climate researchers collaborate with Polynesian navigators to document shifting wind patterns using oral records dating back centuries. NASA studies their star-based orientation techniques for potential use in interstellar navigation. Even the medical field takes note. The wayfinding mindset offers a model for training surgeons in spatial reasoning. What began as an ancestral survival skill has become a bridge between indigenous knowledge and cutting-edge science, proving that some truths aren't just discovered, they're remembered. One of the most persistent myths about Polynesian navigation is that these legendary voyagers simply drifted with the winds and currents, stumbling upon islands by pure luck. This couldn't be further from the truth. Their journeys were anything but accidental. Picture setting sail from Hawaii to Tahiti, a distance of over 2,500 miles, with nothing but the stars as your guide. You wouldn't leave such a voyage to chance, and neither did they. These navigators didn't just hop in a canoe and hope for the best. They prepared meticulously, studying the skies, memorizing seasonal wind patterns, and charting courses with mathematical precision that would make modern sailors pause in admiration. Another misconception is that Polynesians lacked advanced knowledge because they didn't use instruments like compasses or sextants. But their methods weren't primitive. They were simply different, relying on a deep, intuitive understanding of natural systems that modern science is only now fully appreciating. European explorers, armed with compasses and maps, often found themselves hopelessly lost in the Pacific, while Polynesian navigators could pinpoint remote islands with startling accuracy. The difference: Europeans depended on tools that could break or malfunction, while Polynesians trained their minds to become the ultimate navigation instruments, processing complex environmental data in real time. Some skeptics argue that without writing, Polynesians couldn't have maintained such sophisticated knowledge. Yet their oral traditions were far more than just stories. They were meticulously crafted mnemonic systems, as reliable as any written manual. Chance-encoded star paths, wave patterns, and even the migratory routes of birds, ensuring critical information survived generations without a single page being written. When Mau Piailug guided Hokule'a to Tahiti using only these oral teachings, he didn't just prove the skeptics wrong. He demonstrated that some forms of knowledge are too vital to be entrusted to paper alone. Then there's the myth that Polynesians only traveled short distances, hugging coastlines like their European counterparts. In reality, their voyages spanned thousands of miles across open ocean, with some routes crossing stretches of water so vast that land wouldn't be visible for weeks. The settlement of remote islands like Rapa Nui Easter Island stands as undeniable proof of their long-range capabilities. Reaching it required navigating to one of the most isolated points on Earth, a feat akin to finding a needle in a planetary haystack. Perhaps the most dismissive misconception is the idea that Polynesian navigation was merely instinctive or intuitive, as if their skills were some mystical gift rather than hard-earned expertise. This undermines the years of rigorous training apprentices underwent, memorizing hundreds of star positions, learning to distinguish subtle wave patterns, and enduring grueling tests of endurance and focus. Master navigators weren't born, they were made through decades of disciplined practice. Modern scientists studying their techniques have found that their ability to detect minute changes in swell direction or interpret cloud formations rivals the precision of electronic navigation systems. The truth is, Polynesian navigation wasn't just effective, it was a triumph of human ingenuity, a system so refined that it challenges our assumptions about what advanced technology really means. In an age where we rely on satellites to tell us where we are, their legacy reminds us that the greatest tools we possess aren't made of metal and circuits, but of observation, memory, and an unshakable connection to the natural world. When we picture Polynesian navigators, our minds often conjure images of weathered men standing at the prow of a canoe, their eyes fixed on the horizon. But history and oral tradition tell a different story. Women weren't just passengers on these epic voyages. They were master navigators in their own right, holding star paths in their memories and contributing skills that made long-distance exploration possible. In many Polynesian societies, navigation knowledge wasn't divided by gender but by aptitude, with women learning the same intricate systems as their male counterparts. Take the story of Paleohalani, a legendary Hawaiian chiefess who wasn't just a ruler but a skilled wayfinder, said to have navigated between Hawaii and Tahiti multiple times. Her expertise wasn't an exception, it was part of a broader tradition where women's roles as navigators were celebrated, even if later accounts often erased them. The contributions of women went beyond memorizing star charts. They were often the keepers of vital environmental knowledge, recognizing how shifts in wind patterns or the behavior of marine life could signal safe passages or coming storms. In the matrilineal societies of parts of Polynesia, this wisdom was passed from mothers to daughters, with women training alongside men in the sacred art of wayfinding. Some of the most detailed charts preserving navigational routes were composed and safeguarded by women, their rhythmic verses encoding not just directions but the ecological knowledge needed to survive long voyages. When a canoe was being prepared for an expedition, women weren't merely packing provisions, they were calculating the precise supplies needed based on seasonal currents and anticipated weather, a form of ancient logistical genius. Yet as Western influence grew, these roles were often diminished. Colonial accounts focused on male navigators, while missionary records frequently sidelined women's contributions, recasting Polynesian societies through a rigidly patriarchal lens. The revival of traditional navigation in the 20th century initially followed this pattern, with early voyages like Hokule'a's 1976 journey crewed entirely by men. But the tide is turning. Today, organizations like the Polynesian Voyaging Society actively train and highlight female navigators, from Micronesian master navigator Cesario Suralur to Hawaiian wayfinder Kailani Murphy, who in 2014 became the first woman in centuries to captain Hokulea on a long-distance voyage. What's most inspiring isn't just the rediscovery of these forgotten histories, it's how they're reshaping modern perceptions. When young girls in Hawaii or Tahiti see women like Murphy steering canoes across the open ocean using the same techniques as their ancestors, it does more than correct the historical record. It reaffirms that the ocean has always been a space where skill, not gender, determines who gets to navigate the future. The resurgence of female wayfinders isn't a break from tradition, it's a return to it, one that honors the full breadth of Polynesia's navigational legacy. To understand Polynesian navigation is to grasp the very soul of Pacific cultures. It's not just about moving across water, but about sustaining an entire worldview. In an era where GPS and satellites dominate, the survival of traditional wayfinding represents something far greater than historical preservation. It's a living declaration that Polynesian identity isn't confined to museums or festivals. It pulses in the hands of navigators steering by the stars today, just as their ancestors did centuries ago. This knowledge forms a bridge between past and present, proving that modernity doesn't require abandoning tradition, but rather integrating it with renewed purpose. Consider the profound symbolism of the Waukolua, the voyaging canoe. More than a vessel, it's a microcosm of Polynesian values, every lashing representing interdependence, the shared labor of construction embodying community, and the act of sailing itself reflecting resilience. When a navigator stands at the helm today, they aren't just retracing ancient routes, they're reaffirming a cultural contract with those who came before. This connection manifests in tangible ways. On Hawaii's shores, children as young as 5 learn star compass basics in after-school programs, while elders share chants that encode not just navigation, but entire philosophies of environmental stewardship. The canoe becomes a classroom where language, astronomy, ecology, and ethics intertwine, fostering pride in young Polynesians who might otherwise see their heritage as irrelevant in a digital age. The revival of wayfinding has also become a powerful counter-narrative to colonial histories that dismissed Pacific achievements. For generations, textbooks framed Polynesian migration as accidental drift, a perspective that subtly undermined indigenous intellect. Now, when Hokulea circumnavigates the globe, or when Tahitian navigators guide canoes to New Zealand using only natural signs, they're rewriting that story in real time. Each voyage shouts back to centuries of underestimation, proving these techniques weren't just lucky guesses, but sophisticated science. This reclamation resonates deeply in communities where cultural erosion followed colonization. Navigation has become a tool for healing intergenerational wounds, offering tangible proof that ancestral knowledge wasn't primitive, it was visionary. Perhaps most strikingly, wayfinding traditions model a relationship with nature that feels urgently relevant today. Polynesian navigators don't see the ocean as a void to conquer, but as a kin, a living entity to converse with. This ethos ripples into contemporary environmental movements across the Pacific, where traditional navigation principles inform marine conservation. In Fiji, youth combine GPS data with oral histories to track shifting fish migration patterns. In Samoa, elders teach storm prediction using cloud formations documented in centuries-old chants. The revival isn't nostalgia, it's a framework for addressing modern crises, blending ancestral wisdom with 21st century challenges. The true measure of this cultural resurgence lies in its grassroots vitality. Beyond high-profile voyages, everyday acts keep the tradition alive. A fisherman teaching his granddaughter to read the moon's phase for tide changes, a schoolyard game where kids race to name the most stars in the Hawaiian sky. These small moments weave navigation back into the fabric of daily life, ensuring it's not just performed for tourists or documentaries, but lived. When a teenager in Auckland can recite the star path to Rarotonga, or when a Honolulu chef sources ingredients using traditional lunar planting calendars, wayfinding transcends navigation. It becomes a compass for identity itself, pointing always toward home. Polynesian navigators didn't just use the ocean, they listened to it. Every swell, every bird's flight, every shift in cloud patterns spoke volumes, but this language depended on something deeper, an ecosystem in perfect balance. Imagine trying to navigate by fish movements if overfishing had emptied the reefs, or reading cloud formations if rising temperatures had scrambled weather patterns. Their entire system was built on an unspoken pact with nature: take only what you need, leave no trace, and the sea will keep speaking to you. This wasn't just survival, it was a profound understanding that their fate was tied to the health of the environment in ways modern societies are only now beginning to grasp. Consider the kapu system, a set of sacred conservation laws that govern Polynesian life. Fishing grounds were rotated to allow stocks to recover. Certain species were protected during breeding seasons. Coral reefs were treated as living libraries, their delicate ecosystems maintaining the clarity of water that helped navigators spot distant islands. Even something as simple as the Polynesian practice of throwing the first catch back into the sea wasn't superstition. It was ecological wisdom, ensuring the ocean's abundance would continue. When navigators set sail, they weren't just carrying food and water, they carried this ethos, knowing that damaging the very systems they relied on would silence the guidance they needed to return home. Today, scientists are uncovering how remarkably accurate their stewardship was. Studies of ancient fish bones from Polynesian settlements show a consistent size range, indicating they avoided over-harvesting large breeders, a stark contrast to modern fisheries where top predators are often the first to disappear. Their voyages themselves followed seasonal routes timed to fish spawning cycles and bird migrations, turning navigation into a form of sustainable harvest management. Even their choice of materials, lashings made from coconut fiber, sails woven from pandanus leaves, reflected a circular economy where every resource was biodegradable, leaving no permanent mark on the islands they visited. The lessons for modern conservation are impossible to ignore. In Hawaii, traditional fish pond restoration projects are reviving ancient aquaculture systems that sustained populations for centuries without depletion. In New Zealand, Maori navigators partner with marine biologists, using ancestral knowledge of whale migrations to reduce ship strikes. What makes these collaborations revolutionary isn't just the blending of old and new, it's the recognition that Polynesian navigation wasn't just about finding islands, but about maintaining the conditions that made finding them possible. The ocean wasn't a highway to conquer, it was a garden to tend. Perhaps the most poignant proof of their wisdom lies in what happened when it was ignored. After Western contact, the breakdown of traditional practices led to deforestation, soil erosion, and the collapse of fisheries problems that still plague the Pacific today. Yet in places where wayfinding never disappeared, like the coral atolls of Micronesia, reefs remain healthier and fish stocks more resilient than in heavily industrialized zones. The difference isn't luck, it's legacy. Polynesian navigation didn't just teach how to read the stars, it taught how to live in a conversation with the world, where every action carried consequences, and every gift from the sea came with responsibility. Now, as climate change reshapes oceans and plastic chokes marine life, their approach feels less like history and more like prophecy. Modern sailors tracking microplastic concentrations or coral bleaching might do well to study the old ways, not just the techniques, but the mindset behind them. The Polynesians didn't navigate despite nature, they navigated with it, a partnership forged over millennia. In an age of environmental crisis, that's not just a skill, it's a survival strategy we're desperate to rediscover. Reconstructing ancient Polynesian voyages today isn't some romantic reenactment, it's a high-stakes puzzle where missing pieces could mean disaster. Modern crews setting out in replica canoes face challenges their ancestors would recognize, plus new ones they never imagined. Take the storms. Pacific squalls can materialize without warning, tossing a Waukolua like a leaf in a whirlpool. Unlike historical navigators who grew up reading subtle shifts in wind and wave, today's sailors often rely on meteorology reports that can't predict every microburst. When the Hokule'a encountered a rogue storm near the equator in 2014, waves taller than the mast nearly swamped the deck. Crew members, tethered to the hulls, bailed water for hours using nothing but buckets, just as their ancestors did, while the navigator recalibrated their course by feeling the storm's altered currents. Then there's the fragile thread of knowledge itself. Centuries of cultural disruption mean some techniques survive only as fragments. Modern wayfinders often work like detectives, piecing together clues from chants, elders' memories, and colonial-era journals. A single misremembered star sequence could send a canoe hundreds of miles off course. During one voyage to Tahiti, navigator Nainoa Thompson realized too late that a chant he'd learned had two possible interpretations, one leading to safe harbor, the other to open ocean. For 3 tense days, the crew sailed blind, testing each interpretation against the swells until the clouds finally parted to reveal the correct star path. Equipment failures add another layer of peril. Traditional lashings made from coconut fiber, though biodegradable, require constant maintenance at sea. On the Hawaii Loa's voyage to the Marquesas, rotting lashings began snapping mid-journey, forcing the crew to improvise repairs with spare cordage while balancing on wave-battered hulls. Even the sails woven from modern synthetic materials for durability can't fully replicate the responsiveness of ancestral pandanus leaf designs, altering how the canoe interacts with the wind. Perhaps the most unexpected challenge: modern oceans don't behave like ancient ones. Climate change has scrambled currents and wind patterns that Polynesian chants once relied upon. The trade winds that historically carried canoes westward now stall unpredictably, leaving crews stranded in windless doldrums for days. Plastic pollution obscures the natural signs navigators use. Birds mistake floating debris for food, leading voyagers astray, while microplastics muddy the water's color cues. Even the stars aren't entirely reliable anymore. Light pollution from distant cities can wash out crucial constellations near the horizon. Yet these obstacles only magnify the achievements of contemporary voyagers. When the Hikianalia's GPS failed near Rapa Nui, the crew fell back on wave piloting techniques rediscovered from 19th century manuscripts. When storms shredded their sails, they patched them with methods documented in missionary sketches. Each crisis becomes a chance to resurrect lost wisdom, proving these ancient systems still work when modern tech falters. The real triumph isn't just reaching the destination, it's stitching the frayed edges of knowledge back together, one storm, one star, one hard won lesson at a time. Disney's Moana didn't just introduce millions to Polynesian navigation, it reignited a global fascination with wayfinding, painting a vivid, if somewhat romanticized, portrait of this ancient art. The film's depiction of Maui using a magical fishhook to shape islands isn't exactly textbook history, but it captures something deeper: the reverence Polynesian cultures hold for the ocean as a living, guiding force. Where Moana gets it remarkably right is in showing navigation as a learned skill, not an innate gift. The scene where young Moana struggles to identify star positions only to master them through patient mentorship mirrors the real-life training of apprentice navigators who spend years memorizing celestial patterns. Even the heart-stopping moment when she loses sight of the stars and must rely on wave readings reflects a genuine technique modern wayfinders still use today. But pop culture's portrayal of Polynesian voyaging isn't confined to animation. Documentaries like The Navigators, Pathfinders of the Pacific, and Wayfinders take a more grounded approach, showcasing living practitioners like Mau Piailug and Nainoa Thompson. These films reveal the grueling reality behind the romance: navigators enduring sleep deprivation, storms, and the psychological toll of weeks at sea with no land in sight. One gripping scene in Wayfinders shows Thompson recounting how he nearly missed Tahiti during Hokule'a's maiden voyage, a humbling reminder that even masters aren't infallible. Unlike Mona's tidy hero's journey, these documentaries highlight the messy, human side of wayfinding, where mistakes can be deadly and success hinges on collaboration. Yet even well-intentioned media often stumble into stereotypes. Some portrayals reduce Polynesian navigators to mystical figures with an almost supernatural bond to nature, glossing over the rigorous scientific logic behind their methods. A National Geographic special from the 90s, for instance, framed wayfinders as instinctive sailors, ignoring the mathematical precision of their star compasses. This myth of the noble savage persists, overshadowing the fact that Polynesian navigation was and is a sophisticated intellectual tradition, equal parts astronomy, physics, and ecology. On the flip side, modern media has also become a tool for cultural reclamation. The Mona soundtrack, featuring lyrics in Samoan and Toklon, sparked a surge in Polynesian language revitalization. Video games like Sea of Thieves incorporated wayfinding mechanics, challenging players to navigate by the stars without a minimap. Even the Star Wars universe drew inspiration from Polynesian voyages, with the Arch-to-Island scenes in The Last Jedi, echoing the isolation and resilience of real Pacific explorers. Each portrayal, whether perfectly accurate or creatively embellished, adds another thread to the global tapestry of understanding, one that's slowly correcting centuries of colonial erasure. The most impactful depictions, though, come from Polynesian creators themselves. Films like Va and Tatau dive into navigation's spiritual dimensions, showing how wayfinding isn't just about reaching an island, but about honoring ancestors and maintaining kinship with the ocean. TikTok storytellers like at Wayfinder Wednesday break down star compasses in 60-second clips, proving ancient knowledge can thrive in the digital age. This shift, from outsiders romanticizing Polynesian culture to indigenous voices controlling their own narratives, marks a sea change in how wayfinding enters the mainstream. What emerges from all these portrayals is a tension between accessibility and authenticity. Mona may simplify the science, but it inspires kids to look up at the night sky with fresh wonder. Documentaries might lack Hollywood's polish, but they preserve irreplaceable oral histories. The magic lies in balancing the two, letting the legend draw people in, while the reality keeps them rooted. After all, Polynesian navigation has always been both art and science, myth and method. And if pop culture can capture even a fraction of that duality, it's steering in the right direction. European sailors charted their courses with compasses and astrolabes, tools that transformed the sea into a grid of measurable coordinates. Polynesian navigators, by contrast, carried no instruments. Their minds and senses were the instruments, fine-tuned to interpret the whispers of wind, waves, and stars. This fundamental difference reveals more than just contrasting techniques. It unveils two distinct philosophies of exploration. For Europeans, navigation was about conquering uncertainty with technology. For Polynesians, it meant surrendering to nature's rhythms, trusting that the environment itself held all the answers. Consider how each culture approached the problem of direction. European sailors depended on the magnetic compass, a revolutionary but fragile invention. Lose it in a storm, and the ship became a leaf in the wind. Polynesians, meanwhile, navigated by the star compass, a mental map of the night sky where every star's rising and setting points acted as fixed markers. No device could break or malfunction because the knowledge lived in the navigator's memory, honed through years of chanting celestial sequences until they became as familiar as a childhood home. When clouds obscured the stars, Europeans often found themselves adrift, while Polynesian wayfinders seamlessly switched to reading ocean swells or bird behavior, their methods layered with redundancies. Distance measurement tells a similar tale. European ships relied on dead reckoning, calculating position based on speed and time, a method prone to compounding errors. Polynesians, however, perceived distance through the body itself. They gauged a canoe's speed by the taste of spray on their lips or the rhythm of waves against the hull, techniques modern scientists now recognize as remarkably precise. A navigator could estimate progress by observing how long it took a floating object to pass the canoe's length, a living log that required no paperwork. Where Europeans saw the ocean as a void to be measured and claimed, Polynesians experienced it as a textured landscape, every ripple and current a signpost. The contrast sharpens when examining how each culture dealt with failure. European navigators, shackled to their instruments, faced catastrophe when tools failed or maps proved inaccurate. The infamous wreck of the Vasa in 1628, a Swedish warship that sank minutes into its maiden voyage due to miscalculations, epitomizes this fragility. Polynesian voyaging, meanwhile, embraced adaptability. If a storm blew a canoe off course, navigators didn't panic. They recalibrated, using backup systems like wave patterns or the flight of seabirds to reorient. Their entire approach was designed for resilience, with no single point of failure. Yet it would be a mistake to frame this as a simple dichotomy between primitive intuition and advanced technology. Polynesian navigation wasn't less sophisticated, it was sophisticated in different ways. While European tools excelled at standardization, allowing any trained sailor to use them, Polynesian methods demanded a lifetime of immersion. A compass could be manufactured in a workshop, but a master navigator's knowledge took decades to cultivate, woven into stories, chants, and sensory training that no instrument could replicate. Each had strengths. European navigation enabled mass exploration with relatively quick training, while Polynesian wayfinding offered unparalleled sustainability and self-sufficiency, free from reliance on fragile tools. The ultimate test lies in results. European ships often spent weeks or months lost at sea, their crews decimated by scurvy and starvation. Polynesian canoes, by contrast, routinely completed voyages of similar lengths with far lower casualty rates, their crews sustained by intimate knowledge of marine resources and weather patterns. When Captain Cook arrived in Tahiti in 1769, he found thriving communities whose ancestors had settled the island centuries earlier without a single compass between them. What emerges isn't a contest of superiority, but a lesson in diversity. European navigation expanded horizons through technological innovation, while Polynesian wayfinding deepened them through ecological wisdom. Today, as modern sailors blend GPS with traditional wave piloting techniques, we're finally beginning to appreciate that the future of exploration might lie not in choosing one over the other, but in listening to both. The ocean has always been the greatest teacher for Polynesian navigators, but now its lessons are changing. Rising sea levels, warming waters, and shifting currents. Climate change isn't just altering the Pacific's physical landscape, it's rewriting the very cues wayfinders rely on. Imagine training for years to memorize star paths, only to find that the constellations now rise differently due to atmospheric shifts, or learning to read wave patterns that have held steady for centuries, only to watch them warp under the influence of melting ice caps. The challenge isn't just about adapting techniques, it's about preserving a living science in the face of an environment that no longer behaves as it once did. Take ocean currents, the invisible highways Polynesians have used for millennia. The Humboldt Current, a crucial route for voyages between Tahiti and South America, has weakened by nearly 20% in recent decades. Warmer waters are altering the behavior of marine life. Two birds that once reliably pointed toward land now follow unpredictable food sources, and fish species that signaled nearby reefs are migrating to cooler depths. Even the color of the water, a key navigational clue, is changing as algae blooms and pollution cloud once clear lagoons. For navigators, it's like watching the pages of their ancestral maps fade before their eyes. Yet this isn't the first time wayfinding has faced extinction. When European colonization nearly erased these traditions, elders like Mau Piailug kept them alive through sheer determination. Today's navigators are drawing on that same resilience, blending ancient knowledge with modern science to chart a path forward. In Hawaii, the Polynesian Voyaging Society collaborates with oceanographers to track shifting wind patterns, updating star compass charts with new data while preserving their traditional structure. In the Marshall Islands, where rising tides threaten to swallow entire atolls, elders are working with younger navigators to document subtle changes in wave refraction knowledge that could help future generations adjust their mental maps. The most radical adaptation might be in how this knowledge is preserved. Traditionally, wayfinding was taught through hands-on experience, but with some routes becoming unreliable, navigators are turning to technology as a backup. Virtual reality simulations now let apprentices practice reading swells in digitally altered oceans, preparing them for conditions their ancestors never encountered. Oral chants, once shared only in person, are being recorded with 3D audio to capture the precise rhythms that encode star paths. It's a delicate balance, using innovation to protect tradition without diluting its essence. What's emerging is a new chapter in the story of Polynesian navigation, one where the past and future sail side by side. When the Hokule'a embarked on its worldwide voyage in 2014, its crew didn't just rely on ancestral knowledge. They carried water sensors to monitor salinity and temperature, contributing to climate research. The canoe became a bridge between worlds, proving that tradition isn't static. It's a living system as adaptable as the ocean itself. The waves may be changing, but the navigator's resolve isn't. If anything, the urgency to safeguard this wisdom has only deepened, because the next generation won't just need to find islands, they'll need to protect them. Think you need to be born on a Pacific island to learn Polynesian navigation? Think again. Across the globe, from the beaches of Hawaii to university classrooms in Germany, people are rediscovering wayfinding not as a lost art, but as a living skill anyone can learn with the right guidance. Modern programs have stripped away the mystique, breaking down these ancient techniques into teachable components while preserving their profound connection to nature. At the Bishop Museum in Honolulu, weekend workshops transform office workers into star compass apprentices, teaching them to identify key constellations using nothing but their hands as angle gauges. Meanwhile, in New Zealand's Waka Odyssey program, corporate teams bond by paddling traditional canoes while learning to interpret wave patterns, proof that these skills aren't just historical curiosities, but tools for building focus, teamwork, and environmental awareness. Technology has become an unlikely ally in preserving these analog traditions. Apps like Star Compass Trainer gamify celestial navigation, using augmented reality to overlay traditional Hawaiian star paths onto the night sky through your phone's camera. For landlubbers, virtual reality programs simulate open ocean conditions, letting users practice reading swells from the safety of their living rooms. Even social media plays a role. TikTok navigators like at Wayfinder weekly post bite-sized tutorials on reading cloud formations or estimating latitude by the sun's arc. These modern twists don't replace hands-on learning but serve as gateways, sparking interest that often leads students to seek out deeper mentorship. The real magic happens in intensive programs like the Polynesian Voyaging Society's Apprentice Navigator Training. Here, students don't just memorize star charts, they undergo a transformation akin to medieval guild apprenticeships. One initiate described spending nights tied to a canoe mast in rough seas to develop his sea legs, while others recount grueling mental drills, reciting 250 star sequences backward or identifying wave directions blindfolded. The curriculum blends science and spirituality, with oceanography lectures followed by sessions on composing chants that encode navigational data. What emerges isn't just technical skill, but a rewiring of perception. Graduates report permanently altered awareness, noticing subtle wind shifts during their morning commute or unconsciously tracking the moon's phase. Critics argue this mainstreaming risks diluting sacred knowledge, and they have a point. Traditional Micronesian navigation societies once required decades of initiation, with secrets guarded as strictly as nuclear codes. Modern 6-week courses can't replicate that depth, yet practitioners counter that sharing the basics widely acts as cultural preservation, like teaching someone to read music rather than play a concerto. The Hawaiian nonprofit Waukolua takes a middle path, offering tiered programs where casual learners get basic star compass literacy, while select candidates undergo years of rigorous training for certification as PWO Master Navigators. This honors the tradition's hierarchy while preventing its isolation. The diversity of today's students shatters stereotypes. At a Berlin wayfinding meetup, you might find an astrophysicist comparing Polynesian star paths with Kepler's laws, while a mindfulness coach explores navigation as a metaphor for life decisions. In Singapore, maritime historians partner with local sailors to adapt Pacific techniques for Southeast Asian waters. Even children are getting involved. Hawaiian elementary schools now have wayfinding breaks, where kids stretch while mimicking the motions of celestial bodies. This global interest underscores a universal truth. In an age of GPS-induced detachment, people crave the visceral connection to environment that Polynesian navigation provides. Perhaps the most telling sign of success, graduates who have never set foot on a canoe report applying wayfinding principles everywhere. A Tokyo architect uses star compass orientations to design buildings harmonizing with seasonal light. A Swiss psychologist teaches clients to navigate emotional turbulence using wave piloting metaphors. The skills transcend their oceanic origins, becoming frameworks for mindful engagement with an unpredictable world. After all, isn't life itself the ultimate uncharted voyage? The ancient Polynesians understood that navigation wasn't just about reaching destinations. It was about cultivating the awareness to journey meaningfully. And that's a lesson no app can fully capture, but anyone can begin to learn. Before a single paddle touched the water or sail caught the wind, Polynesian voyagers engaged in ceremonies that transformed ordinary canoes into sacred vessels. These weren't mere superstitions, they were acts of profound reciprocity, acknowledging that human skill alone couldn't guarantee safe passage across the Pacific's unpredictable expanse. On the shores of Tahiti, navigators would present offerings of freshly harvested taro and woven pandanus leaves to the god Taroa, ruler of the ocean depths, while in Hawaii, kahuna priests chanted the Kumulipo creation chant to align the voyage with the cosmos's natural order. Every element of these rituals carried layered meanings. The breaking of a coconut symbolized the fracturing of ignorance, its sweet water an offering to ancestors who traversed these same seas centuries before. The launching ceremony, or Piaulug, served as both spiritual insurance and psychological preparation. Crew members underwent days of purification, abstaining from certain foods, sleeping apart from families, and focusing their thoughts through meditation. This mental conditioning was as critical as physical training. A distracted navigator could misread swells or stars, dooming the entire expedition. During the ritual itself, elders would sprinkle seawater over the canoe's hull with fragrant ti leaves, a symbolic baptism that blurred the line between vessel and living entity. Witnesses described how the chants seemed to vibrate through the wood, as if awakening some dormant intelligence within the craft. Mid-voyage rituals maintained this sacred connection. When crossing particularly treacherous stretches like the Te Ara Nui o Toi, the great ocean highway between New Zealand and Polynesia, navigators performed what Maori called Wangai Timona, feeding the ocean with prized possessions. Fishhooks carved from human bone, strands of hair from revered elders, even precious greenstone pendants would be offered to appease Tangaroa, god of the sea. These weren't acts of fear, but of conversation, a way of saying, "We know this is your realm, and we come with respect." modern recreations have found these ceremonies had practical benefits too. The act of communal offering boosted morale during grueling open ocean stretches when land hadn't been sighted for weeks. Arrival rituals completed the cycle, transforming successful voyages into communal celebrations that reinforced social bonds. In the Marquesas, the entire village would wade into the surf to physically pull the canoe ashore, symbolizing collective ownership of the journey's knowledge and bounty. The first fruits from newly discovered lands were always presented to local temples, ensuring the gods' continued favor. Even the way navigators shared their stories followed ritualized pattern-specific chants for listing star paths, particular gestures for demonstrating wave patterns, turning raw experience into teachable tradition. What European accounts dismissed as primitive idolatry was, in reality, a sophisticated psychological and ecological framework. These ceremonies anchored abstract navigation knowledge in physical acts, making complex star sequences or swell patterns easier to recall under stress. They also encoded environmental ethics. By thanking the ocean for its guidance, Polynesians reinforced the idea that nature wasn't an adversary to conquer, but a partner to honor. When contemporary voyagers like the Hokulea crew revive these rituals today, they're not just performing historical theater, they're activating a mindset that kept their ancestors alive across millennia of open ocean exploration. The chants still carry the same power, the offerings the same weight, because the sea remains as vast and mysterious as ever. For the Polynesian navigators, the stars were more than just guides. They were the heartbeat of an entire way of life, intricately woven into the fabric of daily existence. Their celestial knowledge didn't merely chart paths across the ocean. It dictated when to plant crops, when to harvest, and when to set sail. Take the Pleiades cluster, known as Makali in Hawaiian. Its first appearance on the horizon in late October or early November signaled the start of Makahiki, a 4-month season of celebration, feasting, and rest from labor. This wasn't arbitrary timing. It coincided with the arrival of predictable trade winds and calmer seas, making it the safest window for long voyages. At the same time, the cluster's position told farmers to prepare their taro fields, as the coming rains would ensure a bountiful harvest. The Polynesian lunar calendar, or kola, further refined this celestial clockwork. Unlike solar calendars that fix months to specific dates, the kola followed the moon's phases, with each night named for its position in the cycle. The night of Hilo, when the slender crescent moon first appeared, marked the start of the fishing season for certain species, while the full moon of Aqua was considered ideal for planting sweet potatoes. Navigators paid special attention to the moon's path across the sky, noting how its position relative to specific stars shifted slightly each night, a subtle dance that helped them track time at sea without calendars or clocks. This astronomical precision extended to open ocean navigation. The rising of specific stars didn't just indicate direction, they revealed latitude. When the star Hokulea Arcturus passed directly overhead, navigators knew they were on the same latitude as the Hawaiian Islands. Meanwhile, the Southern Cross's orientation, whether it stood upright or tilted, helped gauge distance from the equator. These celestial markers weren't static. They rotated with the seasons, creating a dynamic map that required constant mental adjustment. A navigator setting out from Tahiti to Hawaii in November would follow a different star sequence than one making the same journey in April, adapting to the shifting night sky like a musician tuning to a changing rhythm. Beyond practical applications, this astronomical wisdom shaped Polynesian spirituality and storytelling. Constellations weren't just collections of stars but characters in epic narratives. In Maori tradition, the Milky Way is Te Ika Roa, the great fish caught by the demigod Moi, while in Hawaii, the curve of Scorpius represents the demigod Maui's fishhook. These stories weren't mere myths, they encoded navigational data. The tale of Te Ikaroa, for example, points toward the Chatham Islands, a vital reference for sailors. By blending science with storytelling, Polynesians ensured their astronomical knowledge would endure across generations, embedded in chants and legends even when technical details might fade. Modern astronomers still marvel at their achievements. Without telescopes or written records, Polynesians detected patterns European scholars wouldn't document until centuries later. They recognized that the star Sirius rises and sets in alignment with specific Hawaiian islands, a phenomenon modern astronomers confirm occurs only at precise latitudes. Their understanding of the solstices and equinoxes marked by stone structures like the Hawaiian Heiau temples allowed them to track seasonal changes with startling accuracy. Today, when NASA scientists collaborate with Polynesian navigators to study celestial navigation techniques, they're not just preserving history, they're rediscovering a sophisticated system of astronomical knowledge that viewed the sky not as a distant void, but as a living, breathing guidebook to the world below. Even after centuries of study, the full scope of Polynesian navigation knowledge remains tantalizingly incomplete, like a star chart missing crucial constellations. While we've pieced together the fundamentals of wayfinding from oral traditions and modern revivals, whispers persist of advanced techniques lost to time. Consider the enigmatic Te Lopa, described in scattered Pacific legends as underwater lightning flashes of light beneath the waves that some navigators reportedly used to detect distant islands. A handful of contemporary voyagers claim to have witnessed this phenomenon, describing sudden streaks of light radiating from island directions even when land lies beyond the horizon. Oceanographers speculate these could be bioluminescent plankton responding to underwater pressure changes near land masses, but no scientific study has yet confirmed whether this was a genuine navigational tool or poetic metaphor. The mystery lingers. Did Polynesians master a way to literally see islands through the ocean's depths? Equally compelling are the gaps in our understanding of their longest voyages. Archaeological evidence suggests Polynesians may have reached the subantarctic Auckland Islands, a frigid, windswept archipelago nearly 300 miles south of New Zealand. If true, this would rewrite our assumptions about their tolerance for cold climates. No oral histories explicitly mention these waters, leaving us to wonder, were these deliberate expeditions or did storms blow canoes far off course? The presence of Polynesian-style earth ovens and tool fragments hints at purposeful exploration, but without navigational charts describing these routes, the truth may remain submerged. Then there's the puzzle of the ghost paths, routes referenced in fragmented charts that don't align with any known islands. The Kumulipo, a Hawaiian creation chant, speaks of voyages to Ka'ainakua Makani, the land of the backward winds, while Maori traditions mention Te Taiuria, a current leading to a place where the sea boils. Could these be poetic names for known locations, or do they hint at forgotten discoveries? Some scholars speculate they might describe encounters with Antarctica's pack ice or the volcanic activity of the Ring of Fire, natural phenomena that would have seemed otherworldly to ancient sailors. The greatest unsolved riddle, however, isn't about geography, it's about methodology. How did navigators compensate for the gradual shift of stars over centuries due to Earth's axial precession? The star Arcturus, a crucial marker for Hawaiian voyages, has moved over 7 degrees since Polynesians first settled the islands, yet their charts remained accurate for generations. This suggests their system had self-correcting mechanisms, perhaps through periodic observational updates woven into new charts. The precise mechanics of this knowledge evolution remain lost, leaving modern researchers to ponder whether we've reconstructed Polynesian navigation accurately, or if we're still missing its most sophisticated adaptive layers. Perhaps most haunting are the hints of failed voyages. Oral histories occasionally reference canoes that departed and never returned, like the legendary Tahitian vessel Marama, said to have sailed east toward South America with a crew of 70 and vanished. Were these tragedies, or might some have reached shores we don't yet connect to Polynesian exploration? Recent DNA studies revealing Polynesian ancestry among pre-Columbian Zuni tribes in New Mexico fuel speculation that some lost canoes could have crossed the entire Pacific. Until we uncover more evidence, these stories linger at the edge of history, reminders that for all we've learned about Polynesian navigation, the ocean still guards some of its oldest secrets. The legacy of Polynesian navigators isn't just a chapter in history, it's a living conversation between humanity and the natural world, one that grows more relevant with each passing year. Think about it, these voyages crossed thousands of miles of open ocean without so much as a printed map, not by conquering nature, but by learning its language. They understood something we're only now rediscovering, that true mastery isn't about forcing the environment into submission, but about listening to it with humility and precision. Every time modern scientists confirm the accuracy of their star compasses or the ecological wisdom behind their fishing practices, we're not just validating ancient knowledge, we're being handed a blueprint for resilience in an age of climate uncertainty. What makes their story truly timeless is how it redefines progress. In a world obsessed with faster gadgets and louder innovations, Polynesian navigation whispers a counterpoint. Sometimes the most advanced technology isn't a device but a mindset. Their canoes carried no metal, yet their mental maps rivaled GPS. Their libraries were not made of paper, but of chants that encoded centuries of observational science. When European explorers first encountered Polynesian societies, they often dismissed them as primitive, missing the irony that these primitive sailors had colonized the Pacific millennia before Europe dared to cross the Atlantic. The real lesson here isn't about who got there first, but about the different ways humans have imagined their relationship with the planet. Now, as rising seas threaten the very islands these navigators called home, their wisdom takes on urgent new meaning. Traditional Polynesian practices like reading cloud formations to predict storms or using moon phases to manage fisheries are being studied by climate scientists as adaptive strategies. The voyaging canoe, Hokule'a's worldwide voyage in the 2010s, wasn't just a cultural statement. It was a floating classroom, demonstrating how ancestral knowledge can guide modern sustainability efforts. From Hawaii to New Zealand, young activists are merging star compass navigation with satellite data to monitor coral bleaching, proving that the old ways aren't relics, they're tools for survival. This isn't just about looking backward. The revival of Polynesian navigation has sparked a global movement, inspiring everyone from Silicon Valley engineers to Montessori teachers. Tech innovators study wayfinding as a model for resilient systems, while educators use it to teach problem-solving without rigid formulas. The night sky that guided ancient navigators still shines above us, offering the same lessons to anyone willing to learn. That observation trumps assumption that memory can outlast hardware, and that the deepest truths often come not from dominating the world around us, but from understanding our place within it. So the next time you feel adrift in the noise of modern life, remember the Polynesian navigators. Their greatest gift wasn't just the ability to find islands, it was the courage to set sail in the first place, trusting that the stars, the waves, and their own cultivated wisdom would light the way. If their story resonates with you, share your thoughts below. What lessons do you think we should carry forward from these master wayfinders? And if you're hungry for more stories of human ingenuity, Hit that subscribe button to join us as we keep uncovering history's most fascinating mysteries. The voyage doesn't end